After we copied all the static HTML snippets into the corresponding components, our next task is how do we pass the data in the parent component in this shopping cart into those child components? You will ask, why do I need to pass the data into the child component? For example, here is a list of items. In order to show them in a list or a table, we have to pass the data to the second component because that's the responsibility of this cart list. The cart list receives a list of items and show them in here. Now, what about the third one? The cart total needs to accept a list, and for each item, we're going to have price multiply number plus price multiply number, and so on and so forth. After we do all those summations, the cart total will show the total price. So the second and the third, so these two components needs access to a data that we defined in this parent component shopping cart. For the first one, here I'm going to add another one, username, Harry. So the parent component shopping cart needs to pass this username to the first component. So the first component can show Harry's shopping cart. If I change this to Tom or Jerry, of course, here we'll show Tom's shopping cart or Jerry's shopping cart. So it is very critical to pass data from parent to child component. To make this more clear, let me show you a PowerPoint. As I said before, this is the parent component shopping cart, and we define all the data in this shopping cart parent component. In this case, there are two data, username and a list of items. And here I only showed you two because of space. Now those dark gray boxes, each of them represent a child component. Okay, for now, don't worry about the cart list item. We're going to leave it empty for now. So what happened here is the parent component needs to pass those data into the correct child component. So for example, we're going to pass username from parent to cart title child component. We're going to pass the list to the second and the third, which is cart list and cart total child components. Now, do you remember, how does a child component accept the data from the parent component? Think about it. We're using a concept called props. So in the first component, cart title, we're going to have a prop called username. In the second and the third one, we're going to have a prop called list. Here is the same thing, list. Next, let's go back to VS Code and implement those. Next, let's define the three props in the three child components. Let's first look at cart title. So scroll all the way up to the very first component right here. Besides option template, we can also define something called props. The props for the first one is called username. So once we have this username, we no longer need to hard code Harry here. Okay, so we're going to delete this and use our favorite mustache notation. Username. So if in the parent component we have Harry, then Harry will be printed in cart title. If we change this to Tom, Tom will be printed. So that's how we pass from parent to child. Then how do we pass it? So this is how child component accepts, right? So let me scroll all the way back to the parent component right here. We're going to use v-bind to bind the username to the first component. So this username refers to the username here. This username refers to the component prop we just defined. Okay, so let's go to the third one. We're going to leave the second component empty for now. So the third one, cart list, needs a prop called list. So here, props, list, and copy, and go all the way down to the fourth one, because the fourth component, card total, also needs the same prop. Okay, so let's work on the fourth component first, because in this component, card total, this component needs access to the list to calculate the total price. Now I hard code it there, right? But we really need to go through this list. For every item, we got item.price multiply item.number, and then we add up all the items in this list and show it here. So I no longer need to hard code it here. I'm going to use mustache notation. Here I call it total price. In this case, I will use computed property to compute the total price. So copy and define a computed property inside this component. So after template, I'm going to have a computed, and inside we have total price, and we're going to define it as a function. So that means every time we use this total price in mustache, this function gets called. And in this function, we're going to calculate the total price given this list. So first, I'm going to have total, and the initial value of total is 0. Next, I'm going to go through this array, and for every item, item.price multiply item.number. So this dot list dot for each. And here I'm going to use arrow function. Price multiply item dot number. So when this is done, we can return total. So that's how we compute the total price. All right, before I view it in browser, we need to pass this list to cart list and also cart total. Well, in here, I didn't do anything about cart list. Okay, I only show you the effect of cart total. So scroll down, list. Same thing for cart total. Now I will right click and view in browser. This time, as you can see, I didn't hard code this number, and this number is the result of a computed property in child component cart total. Next, we're going to talk about how to list those stuff. Right now, they are hard coded there, right? We didn't really print everything from the list. I simply just hard coded in a static HTML snippet. So next, we'll look at how to retrieve each item and display this in cart list and a cart list item components.